The world was a tapestry of scent and sound, woven together on a loom of moonlight. Cold air, sharp and clean, tasted of pine needles and damp earth. It filled my lungs, a phantom sensation in a body that was not my own, yet was more truly me than the one sleeping miles away in a sterile apartment. My name is Elias, but here, in the heart of the whispering forest, I am Kale. My paws, 4 of them, were silent on the blanket of fresh snow, each step a delicate press against the planet's pulse. My ears, triangular and sharp, swiveled, capturing the ghost of a vole's heartbeat beneath the white expanse, the sigh of wind through the skeletal branches of an ancient oak, the distant, mournful cry of a bonded owl. This is our reality. When we sleep, we do not dream. We connect. We slip our human consciousness into the vessel of our bonded animal, a symbiotic partner we are tethered to from birth. We live their lives, feel their hunger, their fear, their simple, profound joy. It is a second life, a nightly baptism in the raw, untamed soul of the world. Tonight, hunger was a hollow ache in my belly. Kale's belly. The vole's panicked thrumming was a siren's call. I lower my body, muscles coiling like springs, my russet fur a splash of fire against the monochrome landscape. The world narrowed to a single point, the faint vibration in the snow. I could smell its fear, a musky electric tang. A breath held, a lunge, a satisfying snap. The warmth of life flooded my mouth, chasing away the cold. It wasn't cruel, it was rhythm. The eternal, unapologetic rhythm of survival that we, in our climate-controlled human towers, had long forgotten. As the small warmth settled in my stomach, a new scent cut through the crisp air. It was alien, acrid, chemical, and wrong. It was the smell of man, not the familiar, earthy scent of the park wardens or the hikers who respectfully trod the marked paths. This was the smell of industry, of impatience. Kale's hackles rose, a primal response that sent a shiver down my own sleeping spine. I crept forward, using the gnarled roots of a fallen giant as cover. Through a curtain of snow-laden ferns I saw it, a clearing unnaturally bare where the moonlight pooled like spilled milk. And in the center, 2 figures. One was a man, tall and broad, his face obscured by the deep shadow of a hood. The other was a stag, a magnificent creature, its antlers a crown of bone against the starry sky. I could feel its presence, a deep, resonant hum in the empathic field that connects us all. This was no wild animal. This was a bonded, someone's other half. The stag was not afraid. It stood with a strange placidity, its large, dark eyes fixed on the hooded man. There was no scent of panic, only a deep, profound confusion. The man raised a device, a metallic object that glinted coldly. It emitted a low hum, a dissonant chord in the forest symphony that made my teeth ache. I watched, paralyzed, as the stag's legs buckled. It fell to its knees, not with a crash, but with a slow, graceful surrender. Its breath plumed in the frigid air, each cloud smaller than the last. The man stepped closer. He didn't carry a weapon, not a rifle or a knife. He simply placed his hand on the stag's great head between the noble antlers. The hum from the device intensified, and I felt it, a psychic scream that tore through the fabric of the connection. It was not a sound, but a feeling, a tearing, a void, a sudden, absolute nothingness where a vibrant consciousness had just been. The stag's eyes went glassy. The light in them didn't fade. It was extinguished like a snuffed candle. It collapsed onto its side, a beautiful, empty vessel. Murder was not the right word. This was something else, something more profane. We call it severance. To kill a bonded animal is to amputate a soul. I had heard stories, campfire tales of the psychological devastation, the waking death of the human left behind. But to witness it, the man stood over the body for a moment, a silhouette of absolute negation. Then he turned. For a single, heart-stopping second, the moonlight caught his face. It wasn't the face of a monster. It was clean-shaven, sharp-jawed, with eyes that held a chilling clarity. A face I recognized. A face I saw almost every day. He was my boss, Marcus Thorne. The shock was a physical blow. It ripped me from the connection. I gasped, bolting upright in my bed, my heart hammering against my ribs, the scent of pine and blood still clinging to my senses. My sheets were soaked in sweat. The sterile, quiet air of my apartment felt suffocating. The image was burned into my mind. The falling stag, the empty eyes, and the face of the man who had done it. Marcus Thorne, the celebrated visionary, the man whose eagle bond was a symbol of his soaring ambition. I stumbled to the window, looking out over the verdant, meticulously planned city of Ethelgard. Towers draped in hanging gardens reached for the sky, their lights twinkling like a captured constellation. It was a city built on the principle of coexistence, a testament to the empathy our bonds had taught us. We were a society that revered life in all its forms, because we experienced it so intimately. Severance was the ultimate taboo, the most heinous crime imaginable. And I had just witnessed it, committed by one of our city's architects. I saw the snow in my mind's eye, stained crimson not by blood, but by the memory of a life violently unmade. A silent scream still echoed in the hollows of my soul. I was the only witness, a fox on a hill, a man in a tower, and a question began to form, cold and heavy in the pit of my stomach, a question that threatened the very foundation of my world. What darkness festers in the heart of man who can so easily silence his soul? And what is he building, if not a better world? The morning after was a study in dissonance. The city of Ethelgard awoke with its usual serene hum. Solar-powered skytrams glided silently between towers, their passengers looking down upon the sprawling urban canopy with a sense of proprietary reverence. The air, filtered through 10,000 leaves of genetically engineered ivy, was clean and cool. From my balcony on the 47th floor, I could see the central preserve, a vast, untamed heart of green pulsating with life. From this distance, it looked peaceful whole. But I knew better. I knew there was a wound in its heart, a patch of snow where a great soul had been snuffed out. My breakfast was tasteless. The synthetic proteins and hydroponic fruits, usually a source of clean, guilt-free energy, felt like ash in my mouth. The guiding principle of our society was simple: empathy born from shared experience. Since the Great Awakening 2 centuries ago, when the bond phenomenon became universal, humanity had reshaped itself. How could you eat a cow whose terror you might feel in your sleep? How could you clear-cut a forest that was the living, breathing home of your other self? Our entire civilization, our laws, our diet, our architecture was built upon this nightly pilgrimage into the consciousness of another. We were not just stewards of the earth. We were part of it, our nerves and its ley lines intertwined. To be bonded is to be complete. To be severed is to be rendered a ghost. The human survivor is left with a perpetual phantom limb of the soul, a constant, aching void where the animal's senses used to be. They are cared for in quiet institutions, their eyes forever distant, lost in a dreamless sleep from which they never truly wake. Severance was a crime so deep, so fundamentally unnatural, that it was spoken of only in whispers. And Marcus Thorne, my mentor and the star architect of Nexus Corp, was a severer. The journey to the Nexus Tower felt like a descent into hypocrisy. I, Elias, bonded to Kale the Fox, was a bioarchitect. My job was to design the very structures that defined Ethelgard's symbiosis with nature. We wove buildings into living ecosystems, creating corridors for wildlife between skyscrapers, designing facades that housed entire colonies of birds and insects. We called it harmonious integration. We were celebrated as visionaries, the weavers of a new Eden. Today, it all felt like a lie. A beautiful, gilded cage. The lobby of Nexus Tower was a cathedral to this lie. A 50-foot waterfall cascaded down a wall of living moss. Sunlight, angled by colossal mirrors, nurtured a grove of indoor redwood saplings. And soaring high above, in the vaulted glass ceiling, was a flash of gold and white. Vale, Marcus's golden eagle. His bond was a testament to his status. A predator at the apex of its domain. People on the ground floor stopped and stared, their faces full of awe. An eagle bond was a sign of vision, of ambition, of a soul that could soar above the mundane. A fox bond like mine was seen as adaptable, cunning, a survivor, something of the earth, not the sky, a little too wild, a little too common for the pristine towers of power. Elias, there you are. Marcus's voice was like everything else about him, smooth, confident, and resonant with power. He strode towards me, clapping a hand on my shoulder. He was immaculately dressed, his smile perfectly white. There was no trace of the hooded figure in the snow, no hint of the psychic violence I had witnessed. His eyes, a piercing shade of blue, were clear and bright. How could they be? How could they not be haunted? Big day, he said, his hand lingering on my shoulder, a gesture that was both familiar and suddenly menacing. The final presentation for the Umberwood project. The board is expecting big things. The Umberwood project. My heart sank. It was our most ambitious undertaking yet. A new residential arcology to be built on the edge of the Northern Preserve. The very same preserve where Kale roamed. The very same preserve where the stag had fallen. I've been reviewing your latest schematics, he continued, leading me towards the elevators. Good work. Very efficient. But I think we can be bolder. We stepped into the glass elevator, and the city fell away beneath us. Bolder? I asked, my voice tight. The environmental impact reports show a small section of old-growth forest in the designated quadrant. Marcus said, his gaze fixed on the shrinking world below. Your design meticulously works around it. It's elegant. It's timid. That forest is a crucial corridor for migratory species. I argued, the words feeling weak even as I said them. And it's a Class 4 sensitivity zone. The empathy wardens would never approve a clearing. Marcus finally turned to look at me, and for a second, I saw it again. The chilling clarity from the clearing. The absence of something. Empathy is a tool, Elias, not a shackles. Our purpose is to build the future, not to be held hostage by the nostalgia of the past. A few old trees? The discomfort of a handful of squirrels and badgers? It's a small price to pay for progress that will benefit millions. The discomfort, that's what he called it. The terror of a collapsing home, the panic of displacement, the life and death struggle that I felt in my bones every single night. He spoke of it as an inconvenience. The board agrees, he said, his voice dropping. We need to push the boundaries. I need a new plan from you by morning. One that shows the arcology's foundation laid directly in that quadrant. A direct, confident footprint. The elevator doors opened onto our floor, a sprawling open-plan office with trees growing through the desks. He smiled at me, a predator's smile. I know you have it in you, Elias. You have that survivor's instinct. The fox's instinct. Use it. He walked away, leaving me standing there, the world tilting on its axis. He wanted me to sign the death warrant for a piece of Kale's territory. My home. He wanted me to use the very nature of my bond, the cunning, adaptable fox, to betray it. It was a test, a loyalty test. But to whom was I loyal? The man who was shaping my career, or the silent, four-legged creature who was shaping my soul? I stood there, watching the people work, the entire, intricate system of our perfect world humming around me. And I realized that the greatest lie wasn't the architecture or the clean air. The lie was the belief that we had conquered our own nature. We had just hidden it better. The concrete jungle was gone, replaced by a real one, but the predators were still here. They just wore better suits, and I had to work for one of them. What choice did I have? The night was a sanctuary, a refuge. As sleep claimed my anxious human body, the world dissolved and reformed into something raw and real. I was Kale again, but the usual surge of liberation was absent, replaced by a gnawing unease that was part mine, part his. The forest, Kale's home, felt different. Tainted. The memory of the severance lingered like a phantom scent, a psychic stain on the land. Kale was restless, trotting along the edges of his territory with a nervous energy, his nose twitching, his ears perpetually scanning for the dissonant hum of the man-made device. My own conflict bled into his consciousness. The Umberwood Project was a looming shadow, a blueprint of destruction laid over this living, breathing map. Every tree Marcus had called old and timid was a landmark to Cale. An ancient, gnarled oak was where he had taken shelter from the first winter storm. A thicket of thorny bushes was where the vixen had raised her first litter. This wasn't just a patch of forest. It was a library of memories, a history written in scent and survival. And my job was to erase it. I had spent my life caught between two worlds. I remember the first connection. I was 6 years old, feverish and lost in a child's nightmare. Then, suddenly, the fever broke, and I was somewhere else. I was small, low to the ground, surrounded by the warm, musky scent of my mother and siblings in a dark, earthy den. My fear was gone, replaced by a simple, profound sense of belonging. I was a kid barely weaned. I spent the night experiencing the world as a symphony of smells, my tiny nose learning the difference between friend, foe, and food. When I woke, I tried to explain it to my parents, the feeling of fur and the taste of mother's milk. They smiled. They understood. My father was bonded to a harbor seal, and he would often wake with the taste of salt on his lips. My mother, bonded to a city sparrow, knew the secret routes and rooftops of Ethelgard better than any mapmaker. They were proud of my fox bond. A fox is clever, Elias, my father had told me, his eyes crinkling. He knows the city and the wild. He walks in two worlds, just like a bioarchitect should. That had become my dream, to be the bridge. To design a world where the boundary between the city and the wild blurred into a seamless whole. A world where a fox could hunt in the shadow of a skyscraper without fear. I poured all my ambition into it, rising quickly through the ranks at Nexus Corp, catching the eye of Marcus Thorne himself. He saw my dual nature as an asset. You understand the constraints of the wild, Elias, he'd said once, which makes you uniquely qualified to tame it. Tame it. I had thrilled at the compliment then. Now, the word felt like a brand. Tonight, Cale led me away from the threatened old-growth quadrant, deeper into the heart of the preserve. He moved with purpose, and I let his instincts guide me. We arrived at a small, hidden den, dug into the roots of a fallen pine. The entrance was masked by a curtain of hanging moss. It was his most secret place, a sanctum he retreated to when storms raged or danger was near. Inside, it was dark and smelled of dry earth and fox. And something else. Another fox. A sleek vixen was curled in the back of the den. She lifted her head as we entered, her eyes glowing like amber in the gloom. There was no aggression, only a quiet acknowledgement. This was his mate. My heart, my human heart, ached with a strange, vicarious tenderness. I had never achieved this level of intimacy in my own life. My relationships were always hesitant, guarded. I was too busy building my career, too afraid of letting anyone see the messy, untamed parts of me, the parts that belonged to Cale. Yet here, in the dark, was a simple, profound connection that I could only witness. But as I settled into the quiet of the den, the conflict returned, sharper than ever. This was what was at stake. Not just trees and territory. It was this. Life. A future. A family that was mine and not mine. If I designed the arcology as Marcus demanded, the construction, the noise, the human proximity would drive them from this territory. It would shatter this fragile peace. Cale would lose his home, his mate. My fear was a cold knot in my chest. It wasn't just fear for Cale. It was fear for myself. What happens when the world you build in the day destroys the world you inhabit at night? You become a walking civil war. The hypocrisy would eat me alive. But what was the alternative? To find Marcus Thorne? The man who held my future in his hands? The man who could sever a soul without flinching? To cross him felt like suicide. I would lose my job, my reputation. I would be a pariah in the world I had worked so hard to join. I was trapped. My ambition, the very thing that had driven me to become a bridge between worlds, was now the hammer poised to smash it all. My father's words echoed in my mind. A fox walks in two worlds. He had meant it as a blessing, but it felt like a curse. To belong everywhere, was to belong nowhere. I was a traitor in my sterile apartment, and I was a traitor in this earthen den. The vixen shifted, pressing her warmth against Kale's side. A deep, instinctual peace flowed from her, a current of pure, uncomplicated being. It was a peace my human self couldn't grasp. In my waking life, I had Lena. Lena, my closest friend, a landscape artist bonded to a gentle doe. She embodied that peace. She often told me my ambition was a fire that would one day burn my own house down. I always dismissed it as idealism. But now, curled in the dark, I felt the heat. My greatest fear wasn't failing Marcus or being fired. It was the fear of the connection weakening, of Cale looking at me through his own eyes and seeing a threat. The fear of one night closing my eyes and feeling nothing. The ultimate loneliness. The severance that I would inflict upon myself through 1,000 small betrayals. I lay there, a man dreaming he was a fox, next to a fox dreaming only of being a fox. My two lives were on a collision course, and I was standing at the point of impact. The choice was simple and impossible: save my soul or save my life. As dawn approached, the connection began to thin. The sense of the den faded, replaced by the sterile smell of my apartment. The warmth of the vixen dissolved into the cold linen of my sheets. But one feeling remained, an echo from Cale's simple, powerful mind, a fierce, primal protectiveness. It was not a thought. It was an instinct, and it gave me an idea, a dangerous, cunning, fox-like idea. What if I didn't have to choose between defiance and compliance? What if I could find a third path? The air in the empathy warden's precinct was thick with a strange mix of bureaucratic stillness and psychic residue. The walls were a calming shade of green, and soothing, low-frequency sound were piped into the space, designed to calm the frayed nerves of those who dealt with the fallout of empathic trauma. It was a place few people ever saw, a place that dealt with the dark underbelly of our connected world. I felt entirely out of place in my crisp Nexus Corp attire. My request for a meeting had been met with layers of automated bureaucracy, but by invoking the name of Marcus Thorne and the Umberwood Project, I had managed to secure an audience with a senior warden. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the first move in a game I didn't fully understand, a gambit that could either save me or expose me completely. Warden Kaya was a woman who seemed to have been carved from granite. Her face was a mask of stern neutrality, but her eyes, dark and perceptive, missed nothing. Her bond, I knew from public records, was with a desert tortoise, a creature of immense patience, resilience, and hidden strength. She did not invite me to sit. "Mr. Elias," she began, her voice low and gravelly, "your request was unusual. You mentioned a security concern regarding the Umberwood Project. Nexus Corp has its own extensive security detail. Why come to us?" I took a breath, the lie I had rehearsed all morning feeling clumsy on my tongue. "Warden, as part of our final due diligence, I was performing a deep sensory survey of the proposed construction site. A complete fabrication. I was using advanced bioscanners to map the empathic resonance of the area." Kaya's expression didn't change. "A job for a Nexus biologist, not a lead architect. I believe in a hands-on approach," I countered, trying to channel Marcus's unwavering confidence. During the survey, I detected a traumatic empathic echo, a residue of extreme distress, culminating in a sudden null point, consistent with an unsanctioned severance. There, it was out. I had reported the crime without admitting I had witnessed it. I was just a diligent architect reporting an anomaly. Kaya was silent for a long moment. She walked over to a large, holographic map of the city and its surrounding preserves. With a gesture, she highlighted the Umberwood sector. A small, red marker began to blink in the very area where the stag had died. They already knew. My feigned discovery was old news to them. My bluff had been called before I'd even finished my sentence. "We have been aware of the anomaly for 48 hours, she said, her back to me. The human counterpart, a city councilman named Julian Croft, suffered a catastrophic psychic collapse 2 nights ago. He is now in the care of the Serenity Institute." My blood ran cold. The stag had a name, a life, a family, and he was gone. So you're investigating? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Investigating a psychic echo in the middle of a forest with no physical evidence, no witnesses, and no motive is complex, she said, turning back to face me. Her eyes narrowed. Unless, of course, a witness were to come forward. The air crackled with unspoken meaning. She was probing, testing my nerve. Did she suspect me? Or was she offering me a lifeline? A witness would be in a difficult position, I said carefully. If the perpetrator were powerful. Power is not a shield from the law, Mr. Elias, she stated, but her tone lacked conviction. It was the official line, not the truth. Isn't it? I dare to ask. A flicker of something, frustration, perhaps, crossed her face. We live in a world built on empathy. But some people see that empathy as a cage. They dream of a world without it. A world where they can act without feeling the consequences, without the silent judgment of a bonded soul watching their every move. Such a person would be capable of anything to achieve that. She was talking about Marcus. She knew, or at least she suspected, but she was powerless. Marcus Thorne was not just a star architect. He was a political force, his projects shaping the future of the city, his influence reaching into the highest echelons of government. An accusation without irrefutable proof would be career suicide for her. 2. I appreciate you bringing this anomaly to our attention, Mr. Elias, she said, her voice shifting back to a formal, dismissive tone. Your report is noted. We will handle it from here. I was being dismissed. My gambit had failed. I had shown my hand, and she had refused to play. I felt a surge of desperation. The Umberwood Project, I said, my voice rising slightly. Marcus Thorne is pushing to clear that entire quadrant. The old-growth forest. He wants new plans on his desk by morning. If you're investigating, you have to stop the construction. Place a moratorium on the area. It's a crime scene. Kaya looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a sliver of pity in her eyes. Mr. Elias, do you have any idea how much political and economic capital is tied up in that project? A city councilman's tragic collapse is a tragedy. Derailing the largest development project in a decade is a crisis. The city will not choose the crisis. She walked to her desk and tapped a console. Your concern for the integrity of the site is admirable. I will, however, issue a temporary injunction on any groundbreaking activities in that specific quadrant, pending further environmental review. It's the most I can do. It will delay things by a week. Maybe 2. It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't a total loss. It was a reprieve, a little bit of time. Thank you, Warden, I said, my voice hoarse. As I turned to leave, her voice stopped me. Mr. Elias. I looked back. Foxes are survivors, she said, her gaze intense. They are clever enough to avoid traps, but they are also clever enough to know which fights they cannot win alone. Be careful you don't get caught in a snare of your own making. I left the precinct with her words echoing in my ears. The city outside seemed brighter, harsher. I had bought Kale and has made a little time, but I had also placed myself directly in Marcus Thorne's path. He would know it was I who had gone to the wardens, who had caused the delay. The hands-on approach excuse was flimsy at best. The trial was no longer just about choosing between my career and my soul. I had stumbled into a much larger conflict, a silent war between those who cherished the bond and those who saw it as a chain. And I was now a soldier, whether I wanted to be or not. My first trial wasn't defying Marcus. It was realizing that defiance was not enough. As I rode the Skytram back to the Nexus Tower, a new, chilling question settled over me. Why would Marcus, a man with a powerful eagle bond, want a world without empathy? What kind of freedom was he chasing, high up in his lonely sky? The 2 weeks Kaya had bought me were a fragile truce in a war of nerves. At work, Marcus was a storm cloud on the horizon. He didn't confront me directly about the injunction. He didn't have to. His disapproval was a palpable force, a cold pressure in every meeting, a sharp edge to every request. He assigned me to the most tedious, soul-crushing tasks, reviewing municipal plumbing codes, optimizing waste recycling airflow, burying me in bureaucratic minutiae while the real, creative work on the Umberwood project was handed off to other teams. He was isolating me, neutering my influence, making it clear that my timidity had consequences. Every night, I fled to Kale. The forest was on high alert. The injunction had stopped the immediate threat, but the scent of surveyors and their equipment lingered on the edges of the territory. Kale and the vixen were skittish. Their den, once a sanctuary, now felt like a temporary hiding place. The peace I sought in the connection was fractured, replaced by a constant, low-grade anxiety. My human stress was poisoning my animal refuge. My friend Lena saw the change in me. We met at our usual spot, a small, quiet cafe overlooking the city's aquatic reclamation cascades. Her bond was a doe, a creature of gentle vigilance, and Lena shared that quality. She could read the subtle shifts in my posture, the tension in my jaw, the way my eyes kept scanning the crowds. "You look like you haven't truly slept in weeks, Elias," she said, her voice soft. Her own eyes were clear, calm. Her nights were spent grazing in moonlit meadows, a simple existence that grounded her. I envied her for it. "Marcus is sidelining me," I admitted, stirring my chicory coffee. "The Umberwood project. He wants to clear the northern preserve." Lena's face clouded. Her doe, Lyra, often sought refuge in those woods during the harshest parts of winter. Clear it? They can't. The wardens would never allow it. The empathic fallout would be catastrophic. They would if they didn't have a choice, I muttered, more to myself than to her. Or if the fallout could somehow be muffled. The word hung in the air between us. Muffled. The low, dissonant hum from the clearing. The stag's placid confusion before its death. The absence of terror. It was all wrong. An animal facing death, especially at the hands of a human, should flood the empathic field with panic. It's a psychic alarm bell for the entire ecosystem. But the stag had been quiet. It was as if its ability to feel, to broadcast its fear, had been silenced before its life was. A horrifying hypothesis began to form in my mind, a synthesis of my architectural knowledge and my intimate understanding of the connection. The bond is a form of quantum entanglement, a psychic resonance between two distinct biological entities. What if a device could be built to disrupt that resonance? Not to cut it, but to dampen it. To create a field of psychic static that would isolate an animal from its human counterpart and the world at large. In such a field, you could clear a forest, and the bonded humans would feel nothing but a vague sense of unease, a distant sadness they couldn't place. You could commit severance, and the victim's human half would feel only a slow, confusing fade to black, not a violent psychic tear. It would be the perfect weapon for a man who sees empathy as a cage, a tool to dismantle the very foundation of our world, quietly, without anyone noticing until it was too late. "Elias, what is it?" Lena asked, her hand covering mine. "You're scaring me. I have to know." I whisper, my mind racing. "Nexus Corporation, the R&D division. It's a black box. Marcus pours a fortune into it, but no one knows what they actually do in there. The plan that formed was reckless, born of desperation. As a lead architect, I had high-level clearance. Not for R&D, but for the building's infrastructure schematics. I could access the master plans for the Nexus Tower, the power conduits, the network cabling, the climate control systems. If a secret project was consuming massive amounts of energy or required specialized, shielded infrastructure, it would leave a trace on the blueprints. A ghost in the machine. That night, after the connection with Kale left me more agitated than rested, I didn't go back to sleep. I went to my terminal. My fingers flew across the holographic interface, my heart pounding with each security layer I bypassed. I was deep in territory that could get me fired and imprisoned. I pulled up the schematics for the sublevels of the R&D department, designated Sector Gamma. On the surface, it was all standard labs and server farms. But when I cross-referenced the energy consumption grids, I found it. A single lab, designated G7, was drawing more power than the entire rest of the floor combined. The power wasn't coming from the building's main solar grid. It was routed through a dedicated, shielded conduit that led to a private geothermal tap deep beneath the tower. The room itself was shielded with layers of dense, exotic alloys the same kind used in the deep space probes to protect sensitive instruments from cosmic radiation. This wasn't a standard lab. It was a containment chamber. My blood turned to ice. I hacked into the lab's internal climate control logs, searching for any data, anything at all. Most of it was encrypted, but I found one unsecured file, a thermal imaging archive from a recent systems test. The file opened. It showed a heat map of Lab G7. In the center was a large, cylindrical device glowing with residual energy. And in a transparent pen next to it was a life form, a small mammal, a rabbit. I watched the archived footage as the device was activated. A wave of energy, invisible to the naked eye, but visible on the thermal scan, washed over the pen. The rabbit, which had been nervously grooming itself, suddenly froze. Its thermal signature, the glow of its life, didn't vanish. It dimmed. Its body was still alive, still warm, but the radiant energy that all living, conscious beings emit seemed to shrink, to curdle, to pull inward. It was still breathing, its heart was still beating, but it had become a biological machine. An empty vessel. This was it. A severance device. Not just a weapon to kill a single bonded animal, but a technology that could pacify and isolate on a massive scale. Marcus wasn't just a murderer. He was building a weapon of spiritual mass destruction. The Umbrawood project wasn't just about a new arcology, it was the testing ground. He would use the dampener. That's what it had to be, a field that dampened the connection, to clear the forest with impunity, proving the technology's efficacy to his secret investors. And the stag? Julian Croft's stag? That wasn't an act of random cruelty. It was a field test, a calibration. I leaned back, a profound sickness washing over me. We weren't living in a gilded cage. We were living in a laboratory. And Marcus Thorne was the chief scientist, ready to begin his great experiment. He didn't want to just break the rules of our world. He wanted to rewrite the laws of reality itself. And I, the fox, had just wandered right into the heart of his trap. I now knew his secret. In his world, that made me not a threat, but the next variable to be eliminated. My temporary injunction wasn't just an annoyance to him anymore. It was a direct challenge. The clock was ticking, and I could hear it. But was it ticking down for his project or for me? The revelation of the severance device changed everything. The world no longer felt real. The serene sky trams, the lush vertical gardens, the smiling faces of my fellow citizens. It all seemed like an elaborate stage set, and I was the only one who had seen the gaping hole in the backdrop. My fear was no longer a vague anxiety. It was a cold, sharp-edged certainty. Marcus wasn't just a criminal. He was a heretic plotting to tear down the god of our age, empathy itself. I had to show someone. I copied the schematics and the thermal imaging file onto a secure data chip, my hands trembling. Lena was the only person I could trust. I met her in the deepest, most secluded part of the Central Preserve, a place where the hum of the city was just a distant memory. I showed her everything. As she watched the footage of the rabbit's light dimming, her face, usually so open and gentle, became a mask of horrified disbelief. The doe within her recoiled, a wave of pure terror that I could feel through our shared friendship. This is the end of everything," she whispered, looking at me, her eyes wide with fear. "Elias, you can't fight this alone. We have to take this to the High Council, to the wardens, to everyone." "To Warden Kaya?" I replied, the bitterness sharp in my voice. "I tried. She gave me 2 weeks. Marcus is more powerful than the law, Lena. He is the law in this city. If we go public, he'll bury this. He'll bury us. He'll paint me as a disgruntled employee, a corporate spy. He'll discredit the data. Then what do we do?" she cried, her voice trembling. "We can't do nothing. Think of Lyra. Think of Kale. Think of everyone. I don't know." I confessed, the weight of it all crushing me. "I just know a direct confrontation is suicide." My words were more prophetic than I knew. The next morning, I was summoned, not to Marcus's office, but to the boardroom on the executive floor. The room was dark, the city lights twinkling far below. Marcus was waiting for me, standing before the vast window, a silhouette against the skyline. He was alone. "Elias," he said, turning slowly. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "You've been avoiding me. I've been busy with the assignments you gave me." I said, "My defense is already up." "Ah, yes. The plumbing codes. My apologies for that." "I was disappointed," he said, walking towards me. "You showed such promise. That brilliant feral mind. The perfect blend of human ingenuity and animal instinct. And then you let fear get the better of you. You went to the wardens. You try to hide behind bureaucracy. That is not the way of the fox, Elias. Or the eagle." My blood ran cold. He knew. Of course, he knew. "The injunction will be lifted by morning," he continued, circling me like a predator. "My associates on the council have been persuaded. The Umberwood project will proceed as planned." "As I planned." "You can't," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "The forest is a sentimental relic," he snapped, his composure finally breaking. For a moment, his face was a mask of furious contempt. "It's a symbol of our stagnation. For 200 years, we have let this psychic leash dictate our destiny. We whisper apologies to the trees we trim. We mourn the pests we exterminate. We have shackled our potential to the feelings of squirrels and rabbits. Do you have any idea what we could achieve if we were free?" "Free?" I shot back. "What you call a leash, the rest of us call humanity. It's our connection, our empathy. It's what stops us from becoming monsters." Marcus laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You think this is humanity? This timid pastoral fantasy? Living our second lives as beasts in the dirt. Our ancestors built empires, crossed oceans, reached for the stars. And what do? We design prettier cages. I'm not destroying humanity, Elias. I'm trying to reclaim it." He stopped in front of me, his blue eyes boring into mine. "You think I don't understand the bond? My eagle, Vale, he is magnificent. But when I connect, I feel his limitations. The narrowness of his instincts. The tyranny of the wind. The endless hunt for sustenance. He can soar, but he cannot build. He cannot dream beyond the next meal. That bond is a constant reminder of the cage of biology. I will not be confined by it. Here was the heart of it. The terrible, lonely secret of the man who soared. His bond wasn't a gift. It was his personal hell. A nightly humiliation. "I gave you a choice, Elias," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Join me. Help me build a new world. A world of true potential, unburdened. You, with your fox's mind, could be instrumental." This was the turning point. The offer. The temptation. Betray everything I believed in for a seat at the right hand of the new god he wanted to become. "No," I said, the word a stone in my throat. Marcus's face hardened. The mask of the visionary fell away, revealing the cold, pragmatic face of the severer from the moonlit clearing. "I thought so. Pity." He tapped his watch. The doors to the boardroom hissed open. 2 security guards, large men with blank expressions, stepped inside. But it wasn't them that made my heart stop. It was the device one of them was holding. A smaller, portable version of the dampener from Lab G7. "I can't have you interfering," Marcus said calmly. "And I can't risk you becoming a martyr. So, we're going to conduct a little experiment. A controlled severance." My mind reeled. "Controlled severance? We're going to disconnect you from your pest," he sneered. "Not permanently. Just a demonstration. We'll dampen the link until your little fox is out of your head. Once you feel the clarity of being purely human again, I think you'll be more receptive to my offer." The guard advanced with the device. Panic, pure and primal, seized me. This was a fate worse than death. To be locked inside my own skull, while Kale was alone, terrified, and unreachable. To have that vibrant, second life amputated. "You're the monster, Marcus," I choked out. "No, Elias," he said, turning back to the window. "I'm the cure." The guard raised the device. The low, dissonant hum began, the same sound that had preceded the stag's death. It filled the room, pressing in on me, making my teeth ache and my vision swim. I felt a strange tingling at the base of my skull, where the psychic tether to Kale was anchored. It felt like a thread being stretched, pulled taut, about to snap. I reached out with my mind, screaming Kale's name into the void, but the connection was already fraying, dissolving into static. The world of scent and moonlight began to recede, replaced by the cold, sterile darkness of the boardroom. The hum grew louder, and the last thing I felt from Kale was a wave of pure, unadulterated terror. Then nothing. The line went dead. The symphony was silenced. I was alone. The silence was absolute. It was not the absence of sound, but the absence of sensation. For my entire life, the connection had been a constant, subconscious hum beneath the surface of my waking thoughts, a baseline of another's existence. Kale's warmth, his senses, his life force had always been there, a quiet resonance in the back of my mind. Now it was gone. The space it had occupied in my soul was a perfect, horrifying vacuum. I fell to my knees, gasping, but the air felt thin, useless. My body was my own, and only my own for the first time, and the solitude was a physical agony. It was like being rendered deaf and blind on a spiritual plane. The world seemed flat, two-dimensional, leached of all its texture and depth. I looked at my own hands, and they were the hands of a stranger. You see, Marcus's voice was a distant intrusion. Clarity, purity, no more distraction. Just you, your thoughts, your ambition. I looked up at him, my vision blurred with tears I didn't know I was shedding. He looked diminished. Without the subtle overlay of the empathic field, he was just a man in a suit. The aura of power, the predatory grace, it was all gone, a trick of the light I could no longer perceive. What have you done? I whispered, my voice ragged. I've set you free, he said, with the chilling conviction of a zealot. The effect is temporary. The field will dissipate in an hour. Think of it as a trial period. Consider my offer. You have until morning to give me your answer. He nodded to the guards. Let him go. They lowered the device and stepped back. The hum ceased. I was left kneeling on the floor of the boardroom, a hollowed-out man. Stumbling to my feet, I fled. I walked through the corridors of Nexus Corp like a ghost, invisible to the vibrant life I had once helped design. The living walls, the indoor trees, they were just objects now, green decorations. I could not feel their quiet, vegetative life force. I was an outsider. I didn't go home. I took a transport to the edge of the Northern Preserve, the place where my human world ended and Kale's began. I stood at the tree-line as dusk fell, staring into the darkening woods. It was just a forest now, a collection of trees and shadows. The symphony was gone. I couldn't smell the damp earth. I couldn't hear the vole's heartbeat. I couldn't feel the ancient pulse of the place. I was locked out. Panic gave way to a cold, terrifying resolve. This was not freedom. This was damnation. Marcus hadn't shown me clarity. He had shown me the shape of his own personal hell. A world without connection, without empathy. A world of profound, screaming loneliness. He didn't want to cure humanity. He wanted to infect it with his own disease. And Kale, my mind recoiled from the thought. Kale was out there, alone. The dampener had severed our connection from my end. But what had he felt? A sudden abandonment? A psychic amputation? Was he terrified? Confused? Was the vixen with him? Could he even feel her presence? Or did the field isolate him entirely? The thought of his terror, a terror I could no longer share or soothe, was a torment worse than my own emptiness. This was the choice. It was no longer about my career or even my own life. Marcus had made it about the soul of the world. Lena's words came back to me. We can't do nothing. She was right. But a public outcry was no longer an option. Marcus would activate his dampeners, and the world would feel nothing. The cries of the forest would be silenced before they could even be heard. There was only one path. Not defiance. Not compliance. Destruction. The data chip was still in my pocket. It contained the schematics for Lab G7, the power conduits, the geothermal tap, the cooling systems, everything I needed to know to destroy the device and the research at its source. It was an insane, suicidal plan. The lab was the most secure location in the entire city. But the fox's cunning that Marcus so admired was still there, a pattern of thought ingrained in my mind, even without the connection. A fox doesn't fight the wolf head-on. It studies the terrain, finds the weakness, and collapses the wolf's den. The weakness was the geothermal tap, a massive, volatile energy source deep beneath the tower. If the cooling systems for that tap were to fail, and the energy flow to Lab G7 were to be suddenly, catastrophically rerouted and amplified, it wouldn't just destroy the lab. It would cause a feedback loop that would vaporize the entire sublevel, taking the technology and all of its data with it. It would also almost certainly kill whoever was there to cause the malfunction. I stood there, at the edge of the silent woods, as the first stars appeared. The choice was stark. I could accept Marcus's offer, reclaim my bond, and live as a gilded slave, helping him build his empty world. I could refuse and live out my days as a hollowed man, a walking ghost, while he won. Or I could make the ultimate sacrifice. I could trade my life, my single, lonely human life, for the integrity of the connection. For Kale, for Lyra, for the stag, for every being, human and animal, that Marcus sought to silence. My ambition had been to build a bridge between two worlds. I had failed, but maybe my purpose was not to build, but to protect, to be the guardian at the gate. A faint tingling started at the base of my skull. A fragile, tentative echo. The dampener field was wearing off. A ghost of a sensation returned, the scent of pine, a whisper of wind. Kale. He was still there. He was alive. The wave of relief was so powerful it brought me to my knees. And with that first, faint thread of connection, I felt his raw, unfiltered emotion. It wasn't just fear. It was a fierce, desperate protectiveness. He was near the den. He was guarding his mate. My decision was made. My human ambition had led me to this precipice. My career, my dreams of praise and recognition, they were ash. All that was left was the fox's instinct. Protect your territory. Protect your family. At any cost. I contacted Lena. My message was short, encrypted, and contained a single file, a copy of the data chip. If I'm not back by sunrise, the message read, release this to everyone. The wardens, the news feeds, the public networks. Let the world burn, but let them know the truth. Then, I turned my back on the forest and walked toward the cold, glittering lights of the Nexus Tower. I was no longer an architect going to work. I was a saboteur on my way to a demolition. I was going to collapse the den. The Nexus Tower was a sleeping giant. Its public spaces were dark, its waterfalls silent, its indoor groves lit by a soft, artificial moonlight. My high-level access, not yet revoked by Marcus, was a key to the giant's heart. Lena's role was crucial. From her terminal across the city, she began a low-level cyber attack on the tower's secondary systems. A distraction, a swarm of meaningless alerts designed to draw the night shift security team's attention away from the sublevels. It was a simple trick, a fox kicking up dust to distract the hounds. As I descended in the service elevator, the fragile connection to Kale grew stronger, clearer. I could feel his pacing, his anxiety, a sharp, metallic taste in the back of my own throat. He was my anchor, my reason. I was not just a man fighting for a principle. I was one half of a whole, fighting for its other half. The sublevels were cold and sterile. The air hummed with the thrum of immense power. Following the schematics from memory, I bypassed the main entrance to Sector Gamma, instead finding my way to a maintenance corridor that ran parallel to it. Here, the guts of the tower were exposed, thick bundles of cables, humming power conduits, and the massive, insulated pipes of the geothermal cooling system. Lab G7 was just through the wall. I could feel it, a place of profound wrongness, a dead spot in the world's empathic field. The dampener was active, blanketing the lab in its soul-crushing silence. There was a cooling regulator junction just where the blueprint said it would be. Overriding, it was a delicate, terrifying process. Perspiring, I rerouted the primary coolant flow, starving the geothermal tap of its lifeblood. Alarms began to blare, but they were deep, internal system warnings, the kind Lena's diversion was designed to obscure. I had minutes at most. As I worked, the door to the maintenance corridor hissed open. Marcus stood there. He wasn't surprised. He was smiling. "I knew you'd come," he said, his voice echoing in the narrow space. The fox, returning to the scene of the crime. Predictable. He held a small, remote detonator. I was hoping you'd accept my offer, but I prepared for this eventuality. A dead martyr is still a martyr, but a discredited one? That's just a footnote. He wasn't alone. Warden Kaya stepped out from behind him. My heart plummeted. Betrayal. She had been with him all along. Kaya, no, I breathed. I'm sorry, Elias, she said, her face grim. But her eyes were not cold. They were filled with a strange, pained urgency. She glanced at the detonator in Marcus's hand. The warden understands the necessity of progress. Marcus gloated. She sees the bigger picture. He raised the detonator. This won't just trigger the alarms. It will seal this entire sector. You'll be trapped here when the core overheats. Your data, your friend's little stunt, it will all be traced back to a failed act of corporate terrorism. The story is already written. He was going to let the meltdown happen, but he was going to frame me for it, using Kaya as his unimpeachable witness. He would be the hero who tried to stop the madman. My connection with Kale was a raging torrent now. His panic was my panic. He could feel my terror, my entrapment, across the miles. The vixen was about to give birth. The den was vulnerable. My human mind reeled, but Kale's instincts were screaming. Trap. Escape. Protect. Are we men? Or are we just beasts dreaming we are men? Marcus asked, his finger on the button. It was a genuine question. He truly believed he was liberating us. You're wrong, I said, my voice clear and steady, a strange calm washing over me. The bond doesn't make us beasts. It makes us more than men. It gives us the eagle's perspective, the tortoise's patience. I looked at Kaya, and the fox's cunning. In that split second, I understood the look in her eyes. She hadn't betrayed me. She had created an opportunity. This was her own gambit. I didn't lunge for Marcus. I lunged for the wall panel next to me, the one controlling the emergency fire suppression system for Sector Gamma. I smashed the cover and slammed the button. Not water. Halon gas. Inert, suffocating. But it had another property. It was an incredible conductor for the type of energy the dampener produced. Inside the lab, the device, now unshielded by the gas, would be creating a massive, unstable energy bubble. Marcus stared at me, confused. Kaya acted. With the speed of a striking snake, she grabbed Marcus's wrist, forcing the detonator from his hand. It clattered to the floor. "What are you doing?" he roared, turning on her. "My bond is with a tortoise, Marcus," she said, her voice like stone. "I live with 100 years of quiet wisdom every night, and it has taught me one thing. True strength is not the power to remake the world. It is the resilience to protect it." Marcus screamed in fury and lunged for her. At the same moment, the geothermal core, starved of coolant, began to overload. A deep, groaning sound came from beneath our feet. The lights flickered, the air ionized, and the dampener in Lab G7, flooded with conductive gas and hit by a massive power surge from the failing core, did something no one could have predicted. It didn't just fail, it inverted. Instead of creating a field of silence, it projected a wave of pure, amplified connection. It hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just Kale I felt. It was everything. I felt the terror of the lab rabbits in the next room. I felt Kaya's stoic determination. I felt Marcus's raging, lonely ambition, his deep-seated fear of his own eagle bond. I felt the slow, dreaming life of the moss on the walls, the frantic energy of the security guards upstairs, Lena's terrified hope across the city. And then it expanded. I felt the doe, Lyra, her gentle heart pounding. I felt the eagle, Vale, soaring high above, his mind a maelstrom of confusion and rage from his bond with Marcus. I felt every sparrow on every rooftop, every seal in the harbor, every human in their sleeping apartment. The soul of the city, the soul of the forest, the entire symphony of senses washed through me in a single, deafening, ecstatic wave. The overload was too much. The world dissolved into pure, white light. When awareness returned, it was not to the scent of ozone and fear, but to the scent of pine and damp earth. My body was low to the ground. My paws were steady on the forest floor. The den was nearby. I could hear the faint, mewling cries of newborn kits. My kits, but my mind was vast. I was Kale, but I was also Elias. The two were no longer separate, a visitor in a vessel. They were one. The feedback loop from the inverted device hadn't just restored my bond. It had fused us. I looked through Kale's eyes, but I saw with Elias's understanding. I felt the night wind on my fur, and I understood the physics of barometric pressure. I smelled the vixen's maternal scent, and I understood the biochemistry of oxytocin. I was no longer a man who dreamed he was a fox. I was a fox who remembered being a man. I could feel the echoes of the event. Marcus was gone, consumed by the meltdown along with his machine. Kaya had survived, shielded by the corridor. She would tell the truth. The world would know. The world, for a brief, blinding moment, had felt what I was feeling now, a glimpse of total, unfiltered unity. They would not forget. My human life, my apartment, my career, my anxieties, they were distant memories now, like a story I had read long ago. The ambition, the fear, the loneliness, they had all been burned away. Was this a tragedy? Had I lost my humanity? Or had I found it? I looked up through the canopy of the old-growth forest, my forest at the moon. The world was no longer two places, day and night, human and animal. It was one, a single, continuous, breathtaking song. And for the first time, I could hear all the instruments at once. I was no longer just a listener. I was part of the symphony. And in the profound, wild, and eternal silence of my new mind, I finally felt peace. I was home.